In a quaint, tightly knit town, young Andy was no stranger to Halloween torment. Each year, he was subjected to the ruthless pranks and bullying antics of the local troublemakers. They took great pleasure in ridiculing him, stealing his precious Halloween candy, and leaving him disheartened. Andy had endured this torment for far too long, but this year, he had something different in mind, a plan for revenge that would haunt his tormentors in ways they could never have imagined. Andy had always been an avid collector of toys, particularly action figures and dolls. He spent countless hours crafting intricate storylines for his toys, forging deep emotional connections with his plastic companions. Little did anyone know that his passion for storytelling would become the cornerstone of his elaborate revenge scheme. For weeks leading up to Halloween, Andy meticulously constructed a system of strings and wires, designed to manipulate his toys with eerie precision. His room became a laboratory for the supernatural as he programmed his action figures to move with a jerky, unnatural gait and affixed tiny LED lights behind the eyes of his dolls. The result was both uncanny and unsettling, giving his toys a lifelike, haunted appearance. As the fateful night approached, Andy made final adjustments to his supernatural marionettes. Halloween arrived, and the bullies gathered in the town square, ready to carry on their cruel traditions. They advanced upon Andy, cruel grins on their faces, prepared to subject him to yet another year of torment. But this time, Andy had a surprise in store. With a wave of his hand, he set his toys in motion. The action figures, manipulated by invisible strings, began to walk and dance in disturbingly synchronized movements. The dolls floated eerily through the air, their eyes glowing with an ominous light, transforming them into harbingers of supernatural dread. Panic overtook the bullies as Andy's toys circled them like vengeful spirits. His action figures brandished miniature weapons and shields, their faces cast in an otherworldly, spectral glow. The dolls hung in the air, their lifeless expressions transformed into something far more sinister. With a mixture of disbelief and terror, the bullies dropped their sacks of Halloween candy, and a frenzied scramble to escape ensued. The town square echoed with their terrified screams as they fled from what they believed to be malevolent apparitions. The spectacle was so chilling that even the bravest onlookers were left in awe, uncertain if they had witnessed a trick or a genuine Halloween miracle. For those who had tormented Andy for years, this haunting experience served as a humbling and frightening reminder. Andy, with an impish smile on his face, claimed not only his own stash of candy but also the loot abandoned by the fleeing bullies. His reputation as a master of the supernatural grew, making him an enigmatic figure who had not only won back Halloween but had also provided a spine-tingling show for the town's children. The bullies, now thoroughly spooked and humiliated, dared not cross paths with Andy again. His name became synonymous with Halloween trickery and clever vengeance, serving as an enduring lesson to the bullies and an inspiration to those who had once been bullied. Andy had reclaimed Halloween for all the tormented children in town, demonstrating that even the smallest among them could have the biggest, spookiest tricks up their sleeves. Halloween, once a day of dread for Andy, had now become a day of redemption and empowerment.
In the town of Hollowsville, Halloween was the season of fear, and the local bullies always took full advantage of it. They relished tormenting Peter, a timid boy known for his love of magic and the supernatural. Year after year, they subjected him to cruel pranks, stealing his candy and laughing at his expense. But this year, Peter was determined to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Peter was a passionate student of the occult and had spent countless hours studying ancient spells and mysterious rituals. He had unearthed a long-forgotten incantation that promised to bring inanimate objects to life on Halloween night. It was his secret weapon for revenge. As the days leading up to Halloween passed, Peter diligently prepared for the night of reckoning. He gathered an assortment of eerie objects, from antique porcelain dolls to old ventriloquist dummies, carefully arranging them around his room. He practiced the incantation, ensuring that every word was enunciated with precision. On Halloween night, as the bullies gathered in a dimly lit town square, Peter was ready. He donned a black robe and donned a hood, adding an air of mystery to his presence. With a flick of his wrist, he cast the incantation, and his eerie collection of objects began to stir. The porcelain dolls blinked with uncanny lifelike eyes, their painted lips curling into eerie smiles. Ventriloquist dummies sprung to life, their wooden jaws moving in a disconcerting semblance of speech. The bullies, who initially believed it was just a Halloween prank, soon realized that something supernatural was afoot. The once fearless tormentors were now at the mercy of Peter's creations. The dolls and dummies, imbued with an otherworldly spirit, moved in eerie synchronization, encircling the bullies, who now trembled with fear. As Peter continued to recite the incantation, the eerie objects playfully taunted their captors, their unnerving laughter echoing through the night. The bullies, paralyzed with fear, dropped their bags of ill-gotten candy and fled in terror. The townspeople, who had gathered to witness the bizarre spectacle, watched in amazement as Peter's supernatural revenge unfolded. Peter's eerie creations left a lasting impression on the bullies, who had finally experienced the fear they had once inflicted on him. Peter reclaimed his candy and earned the respect of the townspeople, who now viewed him as a master of the supernatural. From that Halloween onward, Peter became known as the enigmatic figure who had turned the tables on his tormentors. He had not only triumphed over the bullies but also given the entire town a Halloween they would never forget. Halloween, once a source of dread for Peter, had become a time of empowerment, and he had become the guardian of Hollowsville's eerie traditions.
2 years ago, a group of friends and I decided to rent a condo in a popular tourist town for a long weekend getaway. We splurged on the rental, as the location perfectly suited our needs. However, when we arrived, we were less than impressed with the building and the condo itself. To be honest, the building was more than underwhelming. It was downright unsafe, with rotted egress stairwells, loose railings, and a general lack of maintenance. Our initial disappointment was soon compounded when we had our first encounter with our neighbor, whom we'll call Karen. She lived upstairs and, in a matter of minutes, made it abundantly clear that she was the self-proclaimed president of the Condo Owners Association, COA. She demanded we move a vehicle from the unloading zone, even though it had been parked there for only about 20 minutes while we were unloading groceries. She threatened us, warning that if we didn't comply with her demands, she'd have us removed without a refund. Her words were barely out of her mouth when she hurriedly approached a black pickup truck that had pulled up. Later that day, another group checked into the condo next door, but Karen wasn't around to greet them, so they were spared her uppity treatment. We went out for dinner and returned late in the evening to a relatively quiet scene, with lights out shortly thereafter. The next day, our neighbors in the adjacent condo began their day early and in high spirits, celebrating a busy weekend in the town with friends, barbecues, swimming, and lively music. Their revelry, while boisterous, wasn't causing us any trouble. We noticed the black pickup truck passing by frequently, but thought nothing of it, assuming the driver was a local resident. That evening, after returning from dinner and before heading out for the night, we discovered a chaotic scene. The condo next to ours had transformed into a party zone that had spilled into every available space on the property. Concerned about being associated with this wild party, we retreated to our condo, locked the doors, and took photos and videos as evidence of our non-participation. Suddenly, our door burst open, and we were confronted by an enraged man who identified himself as the condo owner. Karen stood by, watching from the doorway. We initially thought he was part of the party and had forcibly entered our condo. We leaped to our feet, ready for a confrontation. He, however, was under the impression that we were hosting the raucous party, oblivious to the fact that it was actually happening next door. Amidst the chaos and confusion, we repeatedly requested that they step outside, while recording the encounter, but they refused, simply shouting at us to leave. Faced with the escalating situation, we decided to call the police. When the owner realized that one of us was on the phone with the dispatcher, he tried to backtrack, imploring us to hang up. Eventually, the police arrived, breaking up the party and politely asking if we could resolve the issue with the owner, who had had a change of heart and was now eager to make amends. To our surprise, we discovered that the black pickup belonged to the owner, and he revealed that Karen had been incessantly complaining about us. Throughout this ordeal, Karen continued to antagonize us from her balcony, making false accusations and citing COA violations, all while clearly not in full possession of her faculties. We informed the owner that we were leaving the condo and intended to address the situation through the third-party booking platform. Unhappy with this resolution, he tried to hide his frustration while maintaining a facade of civility in front of the officers. He insisted that leaving would forfeit our right to any refunds, a common scare tactic. We pointed to the rental contract, which clearly stipulated that the owner couldn't enter the condo without specific exceptions that didn't apply. With that, we gathered our belongings and checked into a motel recommended by the third-party customer service. Unable to let this injustice slide, I decided to take action the right way. Little did the condo owner and Karen know that I had worked in the town years earlier, particularly in code enforcement, including building, fire subcode, fire safety, and local ordinances. I filed a comprehensive complaint with the town, one of the longest they'd ever received, which prompted an inspection that red-tagged the property due to severe violations. In total, the COA had to spend over $70,000 to rectify these issues, including penalties, fines, and reapplication for their rental license. This hefty expense depleted their funds, and each unit had to contribute. There were even rumors of an investigation into Karen's alleged theft from the COA, although I never learned of the outcome. As a satisfying conclusion, the third-party booking platform fully refunded our expenses. In the end, it was a lesson that being unreasonable and unfair can come at a steep price.
A while back, my friend was selling various items online, including a water heater often seen in community halls and church kitchens. He listed it for $150 and received an email from someone who owned a landscaping business, offering $100 in cash for an immediate purchase. My friend agreed, and the deal was done. 2 weeks later, he received an unexpected email from the buyer, claiming that the water heater was not working. This raised suspicions, as my friend knew it was functioning perfectly when he sold it. Nonetheless, he offered to provide a full refund or cover the repair costs, if they amounted to less than $100. However, instead of accepting the reasonable offer, the buyer sent an invoice for $400, claiming to have repaired the water heater. He also threatened to send a debt collector if the payment was not made within 48 hours. Out of fear, my friend paid the amount and sent confirmation. The buyer responded with a snide comment, saying, "This is the price you sometimes have to pay when selling second-hand electronics," followed by a faux polite, "Have a great day, don't let this hold you back," with a at the end of the email. Months later, in a bar, my friend overheard a conversation about a landscaping firm owner who had swindled someone selling a water heater. Curious, he joined the conversation and learned the full story. The owner had purchased a faulty water heater from a second-hand store for $25 and a working one for $100. He then billed the seller for the repair of the damaged unit before selling it for $300 to a community group. To his surprise, the person telling the story mentioned the name of the landscaping company, and it matched the name of the person who had scammed my friend. Determined to seek justice, my friend reached out to his flatmate, and they decided to team up to address the situation. They spotted an opportunity for revenge when they noticed that the same landscaping company was selling a generator on an online marketplace. In their location, selling a generator required having a warrant of fitness, WAF, to prove its safety and functionality. Failure to provide a WF upon request after 2 weeks could result in hefty fines and forced refunds. Together, they agreed to purchase the generator and seek a WF. My friend had never met the landscaping firm owner in person, so they had to track him down. When they arrived at the owner's location, he insisted on a sold as is, no refund policy, which raised suspicions. The flatmate presented the transfer confirmation as proof of payment, and they purchased the generator for $800 without receiving a WF. They then took the generator to an electrician friend, who declared that the device should have been scrapped, as it was unsafe and would require extensive repairs. They also discovered that the main identifier number had been scratched off but not a second number used for WF tracking purposes. They contacted the seller to discuss the repair costs, which totaled around $5,000. In response, the seller refused to pay, stating, as is, no refund. They then asked for the WF for the generator, but the seller ignored their requests for 2 weeks. Frustrated by the lack of response, they reported the seller to the website and government authorities, initiating a legal process. 4 months later, they found themselves in court, and the government inspector confirmed that the generator was in poor condition, should not have been sold, and had not passed the WF requirements. Additionally, the inspector revealed that the seller had been informed in early 2021 that the generator should either be repaired or scrapped and not sold. The judge ruled in favor of my friend and his flatmate, ordering the landscaping firm owner to refund the $800, cover the $5,000 repair costs, and pay a $10,000 fine, which would go directly to my friend's flatmate. In the aftermath, the owner was furious and claimed he had done nothing to deserve such treatment. My friend, with a sense of poetic justice, reminded the owner of the water heater incident, leaving him bewildered. He paid the $15,000 2 days later. My friend and the flatmate split the $10,000, and they got the generator repaired, obtained a WF, and sold it for $1,000 with a newly assigned identifier number. In celebration, they enjoyed a well-deserved dinner and a night out in town. The summer of 1999 was a season of change, and as a young teenager, I was caught in its swirling currents. I had just acquired a new, to me, bike, and my days were spent leisurely pedaling through the upscale neighborhood development that bordered our trailer park. At that time, the development consisted of mostly empty lots and woods with crisscrossing roads, yet only a handful of homes had been built. It was my personal haven, a secluded escape from reality. It was during these carefree days that I met Evan, a year my senior. His parents seemed to care even less about his activities than mine did about mine. We quickly struck up a friendship, and our worlds merged. We shared our adventures and secrets. We uncovered an old, abandoned shed, hidden amidst the trees, where we'd take refuge from the world. It didn't take long for our relationship to evolve, crossing into the territory of romance and intimacy. To say I was taken aback would be an understatement. As a plus-sized girl, I couldn't believe my luck that such a handsome and popular young man was drawn to me. Evan was a charmer, and he knew how to play the part well. He reveled in the attention and affection I showered upon him, never missing a chance to bask in it. In the golden haze of that summer, we created a world of our own, our dreams intertwining with the reality of our lives. Evan would declare his love for me, showering me with compliments about my beauty and allure. I was smitten. Our love story had all the hallmarks of a teenage fairy tale. But then, the winds of September brought a cold front, and the warmth between us faded. The school year began, and everything changed. Evan stopped acknowledging me, turning a blind eye to our shared history. Our passionate love story fizzled into oblivion, and he appeared as a mere stranger. Even worse, he proposed a secret relationship, urging me to keep our connection hidden. He'd become harsh, demanding that I not speak to him at school, especially in front of his friends. I couldn't bear the humiliation of these conflicting emotions, and I made a decision. I severed ties with him after only a month of this torment, refusing to meet him anymore. My plight didn't go unnoticed by my tormentors. Evan's closest friend, who sat behind me in algebra class, led the charge in ridiculing me. The insults and cruel remarks became my daily routine. Evan, once my source of happiness, now stood by, silent and complicit. Then, one day, the torture reached a breaking point. I found myself on the bleachers during a pep rally, and my sense of humiliation deepened. The friend persisted with his snickers and taunts, tugging at my hair like an unrelenting child. Little did I know that his antics had a cruel purpose. Later, a kind-hearted girl approached me and pointed out the obvious: gum was stuck in my hair. Not a solitary piece, but clusters of gum, wound through my hair like a twisted maze. I was distraught. It didn't take long for me to take matters into my own hands. I grabbed a pair of scissors and hacked away at my own hair, leaving me nearly bald. My mother had to take me to a barber to rectify the haphazard cut. The incident that I thought might make Evan feel sorry for the way he treated me had no impact on him. Instead, he actively avoided me, not once acknowledging what had transpired. To add to my torment, when I visited the shed where we had shared so many memories, it had been reduced to ashes and cinders. The months that followed were a relentless ordeal. Evan got a brand new truck for Christmas, a gift from his well-off parents. He also embarked on a relationship with a girl who embodied the epitome of teenage purity culture. They exchanged promise rings and pledged to remain chaste until marriage. Meanwhile, I saw my few remaining friends distance themselves from me, as the relentless teasing led to their calling me a lesbian psycho. It was as if the entire world had turned against me. The only ally I had was a friend who lived in a neighboring town. He had a car and a plan. We hatched a plot to get even, targeting Evan and his new truck. We spent weekends stalking him for nearly a month until we found his truck parked outside a movie theater, with its doors unlocked. We seized the opportunity and launched an act of rebellion. For over an hour, we chewed through 17 packs of gum, applying it to every inch of the truck's leather interior and carpets. We even managed to work the gum into the radio and air vents. The news of the prank spread like wildfire, and it became the talk of the school and even the town. While Evan likely knew who had orchestrated the act, he never confronted me about it. Surprisingly, years later, the best friend who had been my biggest bully during that time admitted to putting gum in my hair and offered a heartfelt apology. He divulged that Evan had attempted to stop him after the first piece, and my act of shaving my head had made him realize the gravity of his actions. Strangely enough, I hadn't even noticed his absence from my life, as I was too focused on Evan. He was genuinely shocked to learn about the secret relationship Evan and I had shared, as Evan had been frequently teased about being a virgin with a girlfriend who insisted on maintaining his chastity until marriage. While I don't share this story with many people, it remains etched in my memory. It recently resurfaced in a conversation, and I felt compelled to recount it. The story is a painful reminder of the tumultuous adolescent years, and the conflicting emotions of revenge and vindication that can linger long after the teenage turmoil has subsided. In the United Kingdom, there was a practice known as day release, common for technical subjects. It involved working for your employer for 4 days and being released for 1 to attend technical college. On this particular day, I was 17 or 18 years old and commuted to work on my new Triumph Bonneville motorcycle. Many of my friends were also taking similar courses, and we all had motorcycles. However, on this fateful day, the student car park was overflowing, leaving no room, not even for motorcycles. We decided to utilize the empty motorcycle spaces in the staff car park since no staff members used motorcycles. 4 of us parked there and went off for our lectures, confident that we weren't causing any inconvenience as these spaces were always vacant and didn't obstruct anyone. When the time came to leave, we were met with a surprise. Some person on the staff had parked a small coach, a sort of minibus, right in front of our motorcycles. They had locked it and walked away, likely feeling quite pleased with their clever move. At first, we were puzzled, not knowing how to deal with this situation. But then, we noticed that the coach had those air-powered doors with a rubber strip in the middle. Realizing we might be able to use this to our advantage, we sprang into action. 3 of us started pushing the coach while our smallest friend, Mark, took the driver's seat. With a bit of effort, we managed to move the bus out of the way without any difficulty. It was an older bus, probably from the late 60s, so it didn't have a steering lock. As we moved the coach aside, we came up with a brilliant idea. We noticed that the principal and other higher-ups had their designated parking spaces nearby, so we decided to return the favor. We pushed the bus right up to block their cars in. We wanted to make it as challenging as possible for them to move the bus. If we could push it clear, so could they, but it's much harder to move a bus with flat tires than one with inflated ones. So, we wedged all the valve stems with matches to ensure the tires stayed flat. Satisfied with our little act of rebellion, we grabbed our motorcycles and rode off into the sunset, leaving the coach with its flattened tires and the higher-ups in quite a predicament. It was a memorable day that highlighted the importance of not underestimating a determined group of friends with motorcycles. On the floors of the bustling office, the enigma known as John, with only 1 P, made his rounds with the light-hearted mischief of a jester. His shenanigans and antics had earned him a peculiar reputation, much to the amusement of his cronies who had perfected the art of collective giggles. Within this corporate menagerie, one would think it was a perpetual April Fool's Day. Fake spiders lurked in unsuspecting colleagues' lockers, optical sensors of computer mice fell victim to his tape, and air horns played hide-and-seek beneath the unsuspecting seats of co-workers. The atmosphere was one of continuous laughter, annoyance, and bemusement. While the office floor bore witness to the symphony of silly pranks, it wasn't an entirely harmonious tune. John, the self-proclaimed prankster-in-chief, was not alone in this caper. His manager, cut from the same cloth of comedic caprice, supported his playful endeavors, protecting him from retribution. As such, silence prevailed, and no one dared to raise a complaint to maintain a fragile peace. Our protagonist, perhaps wiser or less tolerant of these hijinks, usually had to endure John's antics from a distance. Word of the latest prank would reach them through the grapevine, causing more bemusement than irritation. Yet, there came a day when an encounter was inevitable, as an official form beckoned a visit to John's lair. Anticipating a playful trap, our protagonist entered the lion's den. With a sly grin, they initiated a conversation, not missing a beat to ask John's name. John, with only 1 P, he replied with a mischievous gleam, aiming to confound their understanding. Little did John know, he was about to face a cunning adversary. The trap was set, but it was not the intended victim who would fall into its snare. Our hero, quick-witted and prepared, responded with a mischievous glint in their eye, "Only 1p? You really should drink more, the office air is very dry because of this air condition." A ripple of laughter reverberated through the office, as John's own prank found itself hijacked by a clever twist of wordplay. Even days later, the memory of John, with only 1p, became an office legend. Whenever John's name resurfaced in conversation, his comrades couldn't help but tease him about his urinary moniker and the importance of staying well hydrated. In this light-hearted skirmish of office tomfoolery, it seemed our protagonist had outwitted the prankster-in-chief, and the laughter that ensued transformed the very air in the office, making it a tad less dry and a lot more enjoyable.
Sleep disturbances from noisy neighbors can be incredibly frustrating. In your situation, it's essential to handle it responsibly and within the boundaries of the law. For the past week, my peaceful nights have been hijacked by the boisterous neighbors living on the other side of my bedroom wall. The hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. have turned into a cacophony of shouting and screaming that resonates through the paper-thin walls. Sleep has become a distant memory, and I've reached my wit's end. Last Tuesday, their audacious antics reached a new high when they hosted an impromptu party from 1:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. The ruckus, a cocktail of loud music and rowdy guests, was intolerable. At around 2:30 a.m., desperate for some peace, I knocked gently on the wall, hoping they'd get the hint. Instead, their response was a deafening chorus of obscenities and threats hurled back at me, echoing through the fragile divide between our apartments. Summoning the authorities, I called the police to put an end to the disturbance. However, their intervention merely led to the music being silenced while my neighbors continued their relentless shouting and screaming throughout the night. The situation became a bizarre cycle of noise and calls to the police, with no real resolution in sight. To make matters worse, my apartment complex seems entirely unwilling to address the issue, deflecting responsibility and placing the onus on us to manage the situation by repeatedly contacting the police. I've attempted to engage in a civil conversation with my unruly neighbors, but they've consistently refused to open the door, making any form of communication impossible. The most recent encounter was a tipping point. In the middle of the night, I gave 3 gentle knocks in an attempt to convey my exasperation. Instead of a reasonable response, my neighbors retaliated with 10 furious knocks on the wall, accompanied by a barrage of aggressive screams. With my patience exhausted, I decided to confront them directly. When they finally opened the door, the very individuals who had been screaming and cursing moments ago now feigned innocence, acting as though they were entirely oblivious to the noise. Their explanation left me dumbfounded. They claimed that my daily activities, including apparent loud footsteps and even alleged nighttime activities, were the sources of their vexation. Living on the first floor, it's virtually impossible for them to hear my footsteps, and as for their accusations of nightly disturbances, I work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., visit the gym from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., and maintain quiet hours in the evening. This exchange descended into a farcical display of ignorance, with them adamantly denying any wrongdoing. Their parting words suggested that they would be moving out in just 2 days, though I couldn't help but doubt the veracity of this claim. As I prepare to work from home beginning tomorrow, I find myself teetering on the edge of frustration and exhaustion, yearning for a peaceful environment to carry out my daily tasks. In the hopes of making a point and perhaps reclaiming the serenity I so desperately need, I'm considering playing some heavy metal music at full volume against the shared wall at 8 a.m. It's a gesture to reflect the unrest they've caused, and a response to their inconsiderate actions that have left me perpetually fatigued and irritable.
2 years ago, when I was just 12 years old, I was in the 7th grade. During that time, my parents seemed to be constantly fixated on my grades, which was a result of the emotional turbulence in our family due to the loss of 2 close relatives. It felt like all they ever talked about was my performance in school. As a student who consistently earned A's and B's, I started to become frustrated. It seemed like my parents were obsessing over my academic performance, perhaps as a way to distract themselves from the grief they were experiencing. Our family valued quality time together, and every weekend, my parents would ask me what I wanted to do for our family activity. In response, I would often claim that I was too busy with schoolwork. This continued for around 3 weeks, and then something shifted. My parents, perhaps realizing the toll their constant emphasis on grades was taking on me, told me that life wasn't solely about school, and that grades weren't the only important thing. I understood and agreed with their message, but I had grown increasingly frustrated with their overbearing approach. In response, I decided to playfully turn the tables. I logged into my dad's PowerSchool account, which he was using to track his own educational progress as he pursued a doctorate in his field. Every other day, I would check his grades, remind him about upcoming assignments, and provide suggestions on how to improve based on his past performance. Similarly, I also decided to give my mom a taste of her own medicine. She was a counselor, and she used a family calendar to keep track of her work assignments and their due dates. So, I took it upon myself to pester her relentlessly, urging her to complete her work on time. This little game of role reversal continued for about 7 months, mirroring the period during which my parents were overly focused on my academic performance. It was my way of bringing a light-hearted perspective to the situation, allowing all of us to shift our focus away from grades and towards more balanced family interactions.
About 5 years ago, I used to work as a traffic control person at roadworks and construction sites. I did this as I changed from a retail to my current career, with some stressful times. As a side note, normally shifts in this industry are all short notice. They will call you at 7 p.m. asking you to work a shift starting at 5 a.m. the next morning. Say no to many times and you'll soon find yourself without any shifts. Something you should know about me before I continue. I'll admit I'm a massive troll, but only to those who are a-holes to me in the first place. It's like being an a-hole towards me pops my troll horns out. Let's just say my friends fear me come April Fool's Day once every year. I left that job due to life circumstances and the fact I was moving to a new city over 2 days' drive away. My ex-boss seemed to forgot this fact. As I stated above, if you say no enough times to shifts, they will just not give you anymore. They technically won't fire you, and since you're a casual worker with no guarantee of shifts, they can just leave you in a constant state of limbo until you quit yourself. In my country, they can get away with this, at least 5 years ago. About 1 year after I left the company and moved to my new city, my stupid ex-boss must have forgot I left. Even if you said no to enough shifts, if they were desperate to fill a shift, they'd call you. I got called up and asked to fill a shift the next morning. I kindly reminded my ex-boss I left about a year ago and was in a new city. He apologized and wished me well. So far nothing too bad in my book, until another 2 years had pasted, 3 years since I left. In this time my ex-boss repeated this mistake another 3 times, was getting a little old for my tastes. I even blocked his number, but he got a new phone and still had my number in his contact list. So when he called me this time, I decided to be petty about it. It was about 6:15 p.m. at night and I was enjoying a movie on the couch with my girlfriend. Me, hello, this is Loopy Legend. Ex-boss, hi, Loopy. I need you to come in for a shift at random place in Old Town, tomorrow starting at 7 a.m. Think you can handle that? My troll horns came out as this was the 4th time he'd called me. After each time I told my stupid ex-boss I'd moved to a new city. Me, sure, I can handle that for you. I'll be there bright and early. Ex-boss, good man. I'd be in a tight spot if I couldn't get this shift filled. I went to be late that night and made sure to put my phone on silent. I woke up around 10 a.m. to about 20 text messages and 12 missed calls with an angry ex-boss demanding to know where I was, and mad as hell he had to personally get out of bed early and cover the shift himself since I no-showed for it. I'm happy to report I've not got another call from him since about working another shift for a job I left years ago. I think he finally got the hint. As I stood in the labyrinthine queue at the supermarket, clutching my modest basket, the monotony of the waiting game was disrupted by a promising announcement over the loudspeaker: Aisle 5 will be opening for shoppers very shortly. Eager to escape the snail-paced progress, I prepared to make my move. However, before I could take a step, a mid-20s lady behind me, burdened with a fully loaded trolley, sprang into action. In her fervor to be the first to the newly opening aisle, she carelessly careened her trolley into me, a collision accompanied by neither an acknowledgement nor an apology. Undeterred by this shopping cart skirmish, she embarked on a mission to unload her colossal mountain of groceries. I watched, a captive audience in the sea of queued shoppers, as she meticulously transferred item after item onto the conveyor belt. The minutes ticked by, and the line behind me grew, forming a minor ecosystem of grumbling impatience. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she completed her shopping ritual. With a sense of triumph, I approached her and, unable to contain my grin, casually pointed out, "Hey, they said aisle 5, you're in aisle 4. It was a moment of sweet justice as realization dawned on her face, and I left her to navigate the embarrassment of her misadventure amid the amused glances of fellow shoppers.
So my partner and I moved into a new place a few months ago. We had been furnishing the house, but were struggling to find a nice and affordable outdoor furniture set for the lovely outdoor area. In my country, we have something similar to eBay we would use to bid on second-hand furniture. However, everything that we liked would skyrocket to almost brand new prices. This went on for weeks with not much luck. I honestly thought about just building one, LOL, so we were catching up with my partner's friend, who I already don't really like that much because she is always stirring shit and causing drama, and she mentioned that they were getting a new outdoor furniture set. Huzzah, I thought, as their current one was still in reasonable condition and a perfect size for what we needed. I asked my GF to see if she would sell us their old one, which I valued at maybe around $150, but decided to offer them $200 to make it a win-win situation. The friend agreed and said sure, as they also thought it was only worth about $150, but was happy to accept the $200. Or so I thought. 2 days later, I was on the eBay-like website just having a browse, and I saw their furniture set online for $200. Immediately, I told my GF to ask what was happening. Turns out her friend, without alerting us, looked online and decided she would rather put it up for auction to see how much she could get for it. I mean, that's fine and I get it, but the fact we had already paid her, had verbally agreed that we were buying it off her, and then she listed it without even telling us, that just didn't sit right with me. She gave us the money back, and I kid you not told us you guys should bid on it and see if you can win it. I will. So, because I am a petty a-hole, I started a fake email account and proceeded to win the auction. I even overbid by a few hundred to make them think they had just sold an ancient lost artifact. This is where the fun begins. I created a very convincing-looking email signature and profile to communicate with her as my new alter ego, Steve Barnett, outdoor furniture connoisseur. I would talk to her in all caps to really give off those rich boomer vibes and delay each response by 4 days to make it as painful as possible. This went on for maybe 5 to 6 weeks. I would say my son was coming over this weekend and then respond the next week saying he couldn't make it. Then my nephew was coming over and again he got held up. Basically tormenting her because I am a POS who will abuse the system to get my way. Anyway, we caught back up with friend maybe 2 months after this all began, and would you believe it, they still had their old furniture set. They had to cancel their new set because they couldn't get rid of the old one and had nowhere to store it. I had some cash with me, so I offered her $100 right there and then for it, which she reluctantly accepted, and I took the set home with me. Few weeks later, I came clean to my GF about it and she thought it was hilarious. She's the one. In the early months of 2020, I embarked on what I believe to be a promising journey, a fresh start in a new rental house. Little did I know that beneath the facade of affordable elegance, a series of challenges awaited me. Upon moving in, I quickly discovered that the central AC ducts weren't properly connected. The result? The promised comfort of heating and cooling systems flowed beneath the house, leaving me in a climate-controlled limbo. The electrical setup was equally appalling, 2 measly 15-amp circuits for the entire house. Toasting bread became a high-stakes gamble, and using 2 AC units simultaneously was a recipe for fuses to blow and tempers to flare. Frustrated, I reached out to the maintenance department, leaving messages that seemed to evaporate into thin air. As the seasons changed, my problems multiplied. Winter arrived, and with it came the revelation that my cozy abode lacked any insulation. The central heating, a mirage of warmth, proved non-existent, and electric heaters were deemed too power-hungry for my feeble circuits. Faced with unbearable conditions, I took a drastic step. I withheld rent, hoping to prompt the landlord into action. Instead, I received an eviction threat. A desperate search for alternative housing revealed a market far beyond my financial reach, leaving me trapped in my own personal hell. Desperation fueled my creativity. Next door, an empty house stood, and the sporadic visits by its owner piqued my interest. Leaving my number, I inquired about renting the place, and to my delight, a deal was struck at a price $200 less than my current rent. With newfound hope, I packed my bags and moved out, leaving behind the neglected house of horrors. However, my journey was far from over. I reached out to local code enforcement, expecting a resolution to my myriad issues. Dishearteningly, they shrugged off responsibility, claiming they had no jurisdiction as long as no electrical work had been done. Undeterred, I devised a plan. I removed every fuse from the electrical box, rendering the house powerless. In doing so, I forced the landlord's hand. Electrical work was now imperative. The inspector would have no choice but to step in. As the vacant house lingered in its dormant state for months, my petty revenge unfolded. The potential for further mischief loomed on the horizon, especially given my history with the property management company now overseeing it. Armed with a master key from my previous employment, the possibilities were endless. The keys to liberation, it seemed, had opened the door to a satisfyingly petty saga.
It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind that tends to blend into the monotony of daily life. I found myself in the familiar routine of picking up my daughter from school, a task that usually unfolded without much incident. Little did I know, this seemingly routine day was about to take an unexpected turn. Parking along the street, I positioned my car with the driver's side facing the road and the passenger side conveniently close to the sidewalk. This arrangement accommodated my daughter's car seat, nestled behind the driver's seat. As I stood on the street, engaged in the routine of securing her in the car, fate had other plans in store. With the car door partially ajar, I reached in to buckle my daughter when, out of nowhere, a Honda Civic collided with my open door. The impact was forceful enough to cause my door to slice into the Civic's bumper. In the moments that followed, the driver of the Civic, displaying a surprising lack of spatial awareness, reversed until my door could fully swing open, leaving our vehicles uncomfortably close. What should have been a standard exchange of information swiftly evolved into an unexpected confrontation. The driver, rather than acknowledging the situation, assumed a defensive stance, lecturing me about the importance of looking around before opening my door. His claim that he had no time to react seemed more absurd with each passing moment. A delay on my part likely would have yielded the same result. As details were being exchanged, an unsettling suspicion wafted through the air, the lingering scent of alcohol. Seeking a second opinion, I called my husband, who arrived promptly with our other daughter. The situation took an even more contentious turn as the driver, resorting to tired stereotypes, attempted to blame the collision on women drivers. My husband, in no mood for such insinuations, vehemently rebuked him. The air was thick with tension and the unmistakable scent of alcohol, prompting us to involve law enforcement. Surprisingly, the driver welcomed police intervention, seemingly eager to share his version of events. While providing our statements, we inadvertently overheard him failing the breathalyzer test. In the aftermath of this revelation, the driver found himself in handcuffs. The unfolding events left me navigating the complexities of insurance claims and temporary transportation, as my damaged vehicle awaited resolution. What began as an ordinary school pickup had spiraled into a sequence of events that would leave a lasting imprint on our lives. The wheels of justice, it seemed, were turning in our favor.
Once upon a time, in a quiet neighborhood, I found myself tangled in the web of a less than ideal living situation. About 4 years ago, I decided to rent a property for a year, unknowingly signing up for an experience that would linger long after I had left. The landlady, a character straight out of a tenant's nightmare, seemed to have a knack for neglecting responsibilities. Unattended maintenance issues, her car perpetually occupying the driveway, it was the kind of living arrangement that makes you question your choices. Among the laundry list of problems was the dysfunctional door entry system shared by the 5 properties on the premises. The homeowners, in their collective negligence, had failed to settle the bill with the installers. Naturally, this left the installation company more than a little disgruntled. As I moved into the property, I took it upon myself to resolve the entry system issue. Discovering the contact details of both the manufacturers and the installers, I explained my predicament. I was merely a tenant seeking the convenience of receiving deliveries and welcoming family and friends. The installers, burdened by the unpaid bill, initially hesitated to cooperate, insisting they wouldn't update the contact number linked to the system. Undeterred, I persisted, making a polite plea each day. Eventually, their resolve softened, recognizing my innocence in the matter. The system was finally updated, offering me the peace of mind I had longed for. Little did I know that this seemingly inconspicuous act would plant the seeds for a mischievous scheme that would unfold over the years. 3 years after bidding farewell to that troubled abode, I discovered I was still connected to the entry system. Amused by this unintended privilege, I decided to use it to my advantage. Whenever someone buzzed, I would graciously grant entry, except for 2 specific cases. First, any delivery for the landlady herself, as a subtle reminder of her unresolved debts. And second, any potential new tenant, to whom I felt a moral obligation to forewarn about the landlady's less than stellar reputation. With a buyer beware cautionary note, I'd usher them into the tumultuous world they were about to enter. And so, in the quiet neighborhood, the echoes of my tenure continued to linger, as the entry system unwittingly became a tool for poetic justice.
In the complex world of corporate compliance and law, my journey began as an eager in-house lawyer for a relatively lesser-known multinational software company. The promise of gaining experience in compliance lured me in, but little did I know, I was walking into a corporate minefield. Upon joining, it became evident that this company was essentially run by a group of senior citizens, not in terms of age but in their proximity to the company's owners. This senior brigade consisted of 3 key figures: Senior Guy 1, an enigmatic fixer who maintained an air of mystery around his role; Senior Guy 2, an ex-senior manager tasked with tech contract negotiations, who ironically asked me what a simple EULA end-user license agreement was; and finally, Senior Guy 3, my direct manager, with whom I had to collaborate daily. However, within a month, the bombshell dropped: the company was going private through a sale to an external entity. As I diligently dived into tasks that law firms would typically handle, I realized that I was essentially becoming cheap labor for Amanda, working late into the night to complete the extra workload. My disillusionment grew with each passing day as I realized this job was a far cry from what had been promised. I decided to seek new employment, and the moment I started looking for new opportunities, the toxicity began. The old-timers in the company were unhappy about me leaving, which would mean they would have to answer to the owners or, heaven forbid, do the work themselves. What followed was relentless harassment, as I raised complaints about Senior Guy 1 and 2 with Senior Guy 3, who merely expressed sympathy but did little to address the issue. He blamed the company's burden on these senior figures but did nothing to resolve the problem. Senior Guy 2's response was even more frustrating. Every comment or suggestion I made, no matter how minor, was met with resistance. It was only commercially sound if Senior Guy 2 proposed it; otherwise, I was being too rigid. Frustrated with this environment, I decided to test my theory. I submitted comments in one of the contracts and awaited Senior Guy 2's response. Predictably, he counteracted with verbal suggestions that made little sense, forcing me to painstakingly explain my points during a phone call. This time, I documented our conversation thoroughly and sent it back to him for approval, CCing Senior Guy 3 and asking for his endorsement of the recommendations. Unsurprisingly, they were furious, and my rebellion only intensified their animosity towards me. I decided it was time to leave, tendering my 1-month notice. However, Senior Guy 3 assumed my notice period was 3 months and conveyed his displeasure as the company's sale was imminent, expected to close in 1 to 2 months. On my last working day, I had a conversation with Senior Guy 3, thanking him for the experience. What followed was a chilling threat, where he warned me that I was picking a fight I couldn't win. He vowed to ensure that I would never find employment in the industry again and refused to provide me with my full and final settlement of dues or a relieving letter, 2 crucial documents to secure my next job. His arrogance and dismissiveness motivated me to take action. The revenge begins. I embarked on a 1-2 punch strategy. Shot 1. I served a legal notice detailing the harassment and ill treatment I endured during my tenure, sending it to both the company and the owners. While this often amounts to little more than a symbolic gesture, the involvement of the owners brought the entire board into play. The internal turmoil was visible as Senior Guy 1, 2, and 3 had to explain themselves to the owners, their behavior now exposed. A month passed without a response, but the buzz within the company suggested that the directors were upset with Senior Guy 1, 2, and 3. Involving the owners meant involving the entire board, leading to an intricate web of explanations by these senior figures in front of the owners. The entire office was abuzz with discussions. Shot 2. Knowing the transaction's critical points, I approached the authority responsible for approvals as a disgruntled ex-employee. My active involvement triggered inquiries and forced the owners to engage with the authority. While the sale was never truly jeopardized, the sudden appearance of a government authority forced them to deal with a situation they never anticipated, all thanks to a vengeful former employee. This marked the culmination of my revenge, all while I was already on the hunt for a new job. It was a satisfying conclusion to my tumultuous journey in a company where I had been treated unfairly and shown the door without the recognition I deserved. The experience and lessons learned were my true takeaways from this corporate drama.
Back in the early 2000s, I embarked on a journey with a startup, lured by the promise of an intriguing role despite the modest salary. The position came with a stipulation of no paid overtime, but I was willing to invest in the opportunity for growth and learning. I should note that, at the time, the company was operating on a shoestring budget in a cramped office, but the prospect of the work ahead excited me. As the years rolled on, the company expanded, garnering a host of clients and newfound wealth. The topic of unpaid overtime and compensation for past services started to emerge. A substantial sum, around $50,000, had accrued in unpaid overtime, and it was framed as a discretionary bonus. At this point, everyone seemed to be on board, including myself. We discussed this matter in written correspondence, and I believed that it would be resolved amicably. However, the negotiations regarding back pay, possible equity, and bonuses dragged on, testing my patience. Frustration grew, and I began to sense that something wasn't right. In particular, the company's headquarters had moved to a swanky new location, complete with a well-appointed boardroom and a flourishing number of employees. There was no doubt that the company was thriving financially. Eventually, an offer was presented, offering me a minuscule stake in the company that was valued at an astronomical figure, a stark contrast to the promises made. It felt like a betrayal, and I couldn't simply accept this mistreatment. In the face of this blatant attempt to shortchange me, I decided not to accept this mistreatment. I submitted my resignation on the spot, setting off alarms within the company. The CEO, who had previously declined a contract update, had left me with a 1-month notice period, allowing me to leave without further delay. The following day, I took formal action by sending a registered letter requesting my unpaid overtime and back pay. Regrettably, the response I received was negative. I escalated my demands, prepared to take legal action, and even sought legal counsel to support my case. It's essential to understand that legal disputes were rare in that region at the time, and many companies weren't prepared for such an outcome. I learned that there was a 7-year limitation on such cases, prompting a unique strategy. Instead of filing immediately, I decided to wait until it was 6 years and 11 months from the initial issue. This way, I could demand not only the unpaid sums, but also substantial interest due to the daily compound APR of around 12 to 12.5%. I sent a final letter stating my expectations, but as expected, the company failed to respond. In the ensuing years, I monitored the company's progress, biding my time for the opportune moment to initiate legal proceedings. Armed with documented communications, registered letters, and recorded phone calls, I calculated that the total sum demanded, including interest and penalties for uncompensated overtime, was approximately $135,000. The CEO, still at the helm, was vehemently opposed to my claim. However, when the judge reviewed the extensive evidence, including the abusive phone call from the CEO, the ruling became a foregone conclusion. The judge ordered the company to pay the entire sum immediately and without delay and directed them to cover my legal costs. The company also faced a full audit from the Department of Labor. Within a week, the company complied with the court's decision and paid the outstanding amount. To add a final twist of irony, the very evening of the court ruling, the CEO, perhaps fueled by frustration, was involved in a drunken car crash, resulting in a DUI conviction and a loss of his driver's license for 6 months. His insurance also refused to cover the damages to his luxury vehicle. All in all, justice had been served, and it was a day of triumph.
In the early 2000s, my best friend found himself trapped in a tumultuous marriage. He had been married to his now ex-wife for a decade, with their total history spanning 13 years. Throughout their relationship, he displayed an unwavering and incomprehensible love for her, despite her ongoing battle with alcohol abuse. Her addiction not only took a toll on her but also became a burden for him. Despite the hardships, my friend always had a compassionate perspective, often stating, "It's not her, it's the illness." Last year, his tumultuous marriage took a turn for the worse when his wife asked for a divorce. Her reasoning was surprisingly not rooted in her alcohol struggles but rather took an unexpected twist. She claimed he lacked empathy when she lost her job due to testing positive for marijuana. Her dismissal followed a typical drunken tirade in which she unleashed her fury, belittling him and accusing him of trying to control her. Little did she realize, his only aim was to rescue her from the clutches of alcohol and the emotional pain she inflicted when under its influence. The divorce finally came, but my friend struggled to move on from this turbulent chapter. Just when he thought he was on the path to healing, he called me over one day, visibly distraught and deeply inebriated. He revealed that his wife's reason for the divorce had been a facade. In reality, she had been unfaithful, engaging in extramarital affairs with several individuals. Curious about how he had come to this shocking revelation, he explained that he had been cleaning out their spare room and stumbled upon an old tablet. To his dismay, she had forgotten to log out of her accounts, leaving behind a digital trail of her infidelity. With my friend's consent, I inspected the tablet, filled with evidence that exposed his ex-wife's treacherous acts. Consumed by anger and a desire for justice, I photographed the contents, determined to hold her accountable for her deceit. Once I returned home, I decided to investigate these individuals. 2 of them appeared to be ordinary men, their knowledge of her marital status uncertain. The third, however, turned out to be a registered sex offender currently on probation. To my dismay, this offender resided with my friend's conniving ex-wife. She had been candidly sharing their moments together on social media, revealing her proclivity for marijuana and her extensive firearm collection, used for sport shooting. This revelation led me to take matters into my own hands. I reported the sex offender's false address to the state's sex offender registry and authorities. I provided them with screenshots of her social media posts as evidence, hoping for at least a minor disruption in their lives. Little did I know that my actions would set off a chain of events beyond my imagination. My friend's ex-wife, who usually maintained a casual social media presence, broke her routine with an unexpected update. She posted about the devastating downturn of her year, stating that the sex offender had lost his job, and she was now facing eviction due to financial constraints. To verify her claims, I checked the state's court records, which confirmed the arrest of the sex offender, sparking a newfound turmoil in her life. She couldn't afford to post bail, which left her companion behind bars. Her recently acquired job was insufficient to maintain her lavish lifestyle, rendering her on the brink of homelessness. I'm conflicted about whether I should ever reveal my role in this twist of fate to my best friend. While he rejoices at witnessing some form of justice being served to his conniving ex-wife and her questionable companion, part of me contemplates sharing the sex offender registration link along with a stinging message that highlights the magnitude of their situation. Yet, in consideration of my friend's well-being, I decide to remain a silent observer, letting fate deliver its consequences.